wanted to talk to you about personal productivity. One of the amazing things that came out of COVID because of all of the remote work was that people could actually work from home and be productive. A lot of the bosses still kind of don't like this idea, and I think that there's a lot of mythology around what actually happens in the office. In other words, if your manager can see you over the cubicle wall that you're sitting there, then that means that you're working. Human beings actually don't sit down and do focused work for 8 hours. It doesn't matter whether you're at home or in the office. Also, if bosses could learn how to measure outcomes instead of output, we wouldn't have any of these problems anyway, because we would only care that people are producing the outcomes that move the company forward. What people are struggling with as they have to deal with come back to work policies or even arbitrary hybrid policies is this idea that they want to work the way they did at home, even when they're in the office. In other words, there are a bunch of things that we do in our lives that make us fully human that we were able to do when we worked at home, but are more difficult to do once we're inside the office. When we're in the office, then we start to feel not fully human. We don't feel like we can show up as our authentic selves. And this actually creates burnout. It causes the big quit, and I can only imagine negatively impacts productivity. These ways of working that we could do when we were at home made us feel like complete humans. When we're forced to come to the office, we're not able to do those things. And guess what this leads to? It leads to people quitting. It leads to people feeling burned out, people unhappy at work. And guess what? That negatively impacts productivity. So a Brandt's rant on why bosses do this is maybe subject for another day. What I actually want to focus on is how do we actually become more disciplined about balancing all of the things in our life so that we feel like more contented people. Some of these things maybe you'll be able to do at the office as well, but I want to give you this approach so that you can figure out how to incorporate these things as best you can into your daily lives. So I'm a big fan of what's called the Personal Kanban. There's a website, personalkanban.com. There's a bunch of tools, there's videos, there's courses, there's a whole community that's developed around this. This was started by Jim Benson and Torian De Maria, and I give them all the credit in the world. What's cool about the community is that people add their own flavors to the Personal Kanban in order to make it work for themselves. So that's what I've done, and I want to show you some of my methodologies on how we can incorporate all of the different facets in our life that make us feel like full, contented human beings. First, we're not going to call the things that we have to do tasks. That evokes the word of oxen plowing fields. We have a bunch of things that we could be working on. So I want you to imagine column 1, things that we could be doing. And then there are things that we are actually doing that come from that first column. And the second column is called work in progress, or WIP for short. These are actually the items that you're currently working on. And then the third column is done. These are things that we have finished doing. The Personal Kanban is a visual representation of these things. So you want to either do it online or do it on a whiteboard or a poster, but you want to actually have it up in front so you can see the scope of your work, see all of the things that you're actually working on, but also celebrate when things are done. The visual aspect of this is actually important, and it's kind of cool when you experience it. I like to add a couple of other columns, and the first is what we call the backlog. And these are things not only everything that you could be doing, but it's also everything that needs to be done at some point in the future in order to get a project done. We also have this other column, the pen. You're working on a particular to-do item, and at some point you have to pass it on to somebody else, and now you have to wait for their response. We put that in the pen because we can't actually actively be working on it. We have to wait for somebody's response. So that's a column that we add to after work in progress. We call it pen. So you have these 5 columns essentially. Backlog, things that you could be doing, your work in progress, the things that you actually are doing, the pen, and then finally done. Sort of the rule of thumb here is that you can only have 3 things that are in the work in progress. This is how we manage that we're not overloading ourselves in any particular day. This Kanban board can represent any length of time that you'd like. People tend to call that a sprint. And so it's very common to do a week, but you can do several days, you can do 2 weeks, you can do a month, I don't care. The way I think about how long the sprint length should be is, how long does it take you to accomplish a particular to-do? If you can actually finish multiple to-dos in one day, then you want your sprint length to be shorter. If, however, it takes you 3 months to do one to-do, your sprint length should be longer. The other thing that you want to keep in mind is, how often would it benefit you to pause from your work, look up around you, look at your environment, take in new information in order to ascertain whether you should be changing what you're working on. And so again, that same piece of hardware maybe that you're working on that takes 3 months to do, is it okay to wait 3 months before you're taking in new information? What if something fundamental has changed? I don't know, like the iPhone just came out and all of those legacy flip phones are worthless. So you want to keep in mind that paying attention to the environment, to the world around you, might affect what you're working on, and so you might adjust your sprint length based upon that. One of the most powerful additions to the Personal Kanban are called swim lanes. Swim lanes are to-dos that represent a specific project or activity. So for example, you might be writing a book and you want to keep that separate from your regular job, but you want to make sure that you're making progress on that book. So you create a swim lane that's your book and you have to-dos that are specific to the book. And so this is where the magic happens, because you could create swim lanes based upon all of the things that make you feel fully human. So for example, you can have a personal wellness swim lane. You can have a family time swim lane. So I literally include in my Kanban, visit with my children, call my mom, and that's in the family time swim lane. And in the personal wellness, I include go for a walk, or do some exercise, or learn how to play a new song on the guitar, or read a fiction book. So you could add as many of these swim lanes as you want in order to capture all of these things that are important to you in your life. These are the things that you were allowed to do when you were doing remote work during COVID. You were able to take care of your aging parents. You were able to juggle the kids with your partner. You were able to go for walks and exercise whenever you felt like it. You were able to take naps. These are all things that actually make us more productive people. Sitting in a cube is counterproductive. So the way you use the Kanban board, whenever you're at the beginning of whatever your sprint is, you look into your backlog and you choose, here are the things that I'm going to do during this sprint. So if it's a week-long sprint, you're choosing all of the things that I think I can get done this week, and I put those in the to-do. At the start of each day then, I'm taking only 3 items from the to-do list and putting them in the work in progress. And those are the things that I'm focused on in that day. And as you get those done, you move them to the done column. If necessary, you move the ones that require dependencies, you move them into the pen column. You can either choose other items from your to-do list and get back up to a work in progress of 3, or you can get all 3 done and then go back to your to-do list and choose some more. But guess what? You also get to choose from the to-dos that are in any of your swim lanes at virtually any time you want during the day. If you're getting bleary-eyed reading that 300-page work document and you need a break, guess what? You choose an item from one of the swim lanes. You say, I'm going to go for a walk, and you take that from your swim lane for personal wellness, and you put it in the work in progress, and you go for your walk. And it's the same thing with all of the other wellness factors, for taking a nap, for learning a new song on the guitar. All of these items are legitimate ways for you to spend your time to take a break that when you go back to work, you're actually going to be more productive. The Personal Kanban is really an extraordinary tool for you to be able to get to the point that you're managing all of these different aspects of your life that make you fully human. If bosses cared about outcomes instead of output, they really wouldn't care that you were doing all of these other things, because you are actually achieving and sharing out your achievements in your progress towards shared desired outcomes. The first way to get going on this is just to do it for yourself when you can. Maybe you can show this to your boss and they'll adopt it too.